my dream was as a little girl was to, move away and live my own life. And I thought live a glamorous life, but, God had a different idea and thought for my life. And so, none of our lives are, taken in a straight line. There's twists, there's turns, there's challenges, there's trauma, there's chaos, there's dysfunctional families. And so I grew up in Savannah, Georgia. I was born and reared there. And, at 5 years old, I wanted to run away because I looked at my family and then I looked at me and I felt something was wrong. And I used to pray to God and ask him to please take me home, that I didn't belong here. And one day, after praying about this for a long time, he came into my mind and he said, everyone is different in the world and you all have a lot to learn from each other, that we were meant to help each other connect the dots of this life. There are people who speak different languages. There are people who have different shaped eyes than we do. And in essence, what he was trying to tell me, it's not about the color of our skin. It's about what we've been sent into this world to do and achieve. And, none of us get out of this life unscathed without going through challenges. And, when we awaken to a higher state of consciousness and become more aware of our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, our life begins to shift. It's interesting, to go through sometimes spiritual experiences and try to gain a deeper knowledge of those aspects of the things we need to learn here on this earth. So I'm here at this stage in life and trying to share my knowledge and expertise to help others. It was an energy that just came into my mind. And, I don't know how many people out there are Christians, but we're taught about the Holy Spirit and the power of the Holy Spirit. And, when you're little, you don't understand where those gifts came from. You don't know, is this my mind talking or is this a higher power, God talking? And it takes a long time to learn to discern which is the monkey mind, which is the judge, and which is the actual purity of the message coming forward.
You heard a spiritual voice in the form of the Holy Spirit. For some people, and I know that we had talked a little bit before we went live about the fact that this sounds a little woo-woo, but
right.
The woo-woo thing is not something that you necessarily embrace from a religious standpoint. So talk a little bit about that, because some people hearing this will hear the word woo-woo or the phrase woo-woo and say, that's not for me, I'm out.
Right. Yes, I totally understand that, but I try to teach people that in order to live in God's light, you have to embrace that there's more to this life than meets the eye. What I've come to learn is we're all meant to peel away those layers of that which no longer serves us so that we can rise into a more conscious state of thinking, knowing, and believing. And in order to do that, you have to keep an open mind. And the other important thing is you have to live from a heart space of love, because there, but for the grace of God, we could be going through what some people go through with alcohol, drugs, different challenges in life that have taken them down a dark path. But on that dark path, when people have gone through these challenges, without knowing the dark, how are you ever going to see the light? It's the yin and the yang. It's getting at the light, the magnificence that's within each of our souls and bringing that forward. Because I always say that the soul is perfect. Where we get trapped is we get trapped in getting caught up into all the physical stuff, the external stimuli that affects us. Well, I was pondering one day. I happened to be married to a chef, and I go out to a lot of restaurants, have for many, many years. I
Does he
grew up,
cook at home?
um, I cook at home. If I want to eat great, I have to cook it myself because he works a lot.
Right.
People in the hospitality and culinary world, it's a 24/7 job, so, he's not always around. So, and I actually love to cook. I grew up in the food world. My father worked for Hunt Wesson Foods in Savannah, Georgia, and his mother in South Carolina, she owned a country cafe. So I pretty much grew up in the food world. And I never, ever imagined when I moved to California that I would end up meeting a chef and eating on a much higher, finer dining level than I'd ever eaten in my life. But
I had to ask the food question because I know a lot of chefs and most of them do not cook at home. So,
right, right. But I'm trying to, at this stage in life, get him to enjoy more of cooking with me so that, it creates a bond and a connectedness, I guess you'd say. Um, but getting back to why I wrote the book, when I would go out to restaurants, and I'm also a people watcher, so I would look at other tables and see people struggling with trying to figure out, what am I going to order? What looks good? What sounds like something I would love to eat or try? And you would see people, going through this little bit of a struggle trying to figure out what they're ordering. And then you watch the waiter or waitress come to the table and place the food on the table. And of course, I need to look over and see what they ordered. And wow, does that look good? Is that something I might like to order? Um, and I got to thinking, people spend more time on pondering and struggling with what they're going to order on a menu as opposed to what they're waking up in the morning and the thoughts they're thinking. And one of the quotes that I put in the book that I used to teach my son when he was a little boy growing up is, the thoughts you think and the words you speak creates the reality of what you experience in your life. If you wake up in the morning and you're angry and you're frustrated and you're in a bad mood, what do you think that you're going to attract during the day when you're at school, when you're at work, when you're driving in your car, in traffic? Um, it's reflective of what you put out into the world. And, you know, don't you want to put out something positive and enlightening and a good feeling? Because that's what I think, at least that's what I want to draw into my life. And so that I can create more empowerment and be more successful.
and you have arranged the book to be like a menu and a little
Yes.
bit, and it is, uh, I don't want to say more digestible that way, pardon the pun, but it really is more digestible that way.
Right.
Um, was that part of the thought process when you did this? Because it seems not overwhelming. Little
Right.
ways to improve your life without seeing overwhelming.
Right. I wanted to keep it, as there's an old adage, keep it simple, stupid, and I wanted to keep it simple because I didn't want to overwhelm people because, there's a lot of people that overthink everything. And what that leads to is being overwhelmed. And when we overwhelm ourselves, many people, and myself included, it's happened to me before, where you shut down, you tune out, you turn off, and you don't accomplish anything that way, you know? And just because you wake up in the morning and you read a positive thought, and that's setting your vibrational frequency into starting the day off right, none of us can control bosses, um, someone flipping you off in the car, um, someone being rude walking down the street, and you didn't do anything. We can't control people. So this is proposing that you just go within and work on yourself. You can't control anybody else, but what you can control is yourself. And let me pose this question. Um, what are you allowing to set at your dinner table in your mind? If it's a it or a they, and you're allowing them to enter the dinner table or the breakfast table in your mind, then you have right of refusal to send them away and you don't have to have that meal with them. So we all need to be more conscious that we should be in control of our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Well, you have to understand consciously that they might be toxic. Um, and sometimes you might have to love them from afar. you know, you just have to love them from afar and let them be who they are, because if the light bulb has not come on yet, that's not your fault. That's their choices. Well, my business is called Breath of Energia Healing. And what that's about is empowering women. Um, the biggest thing that I teach is all the thoughts, feelings, and emotions and the challenges of your life may not be yours. The thoughts, feelings, and emotions that were um, your mother when she carried you in the womb affected you. And there's, you may not know what she was going through at the time she was pregnant with you, but all of this is ancestral. It goes further back. What was your mother taught? What were your parents taught? How were they effective? You know? And so I teach them how to uncover those challenges and issues. And, like I said, we all have a right of refusal to say, hey, this doesn't belong to me. This belongs to them. And it's time to heal this family womb.
A lot of people have a difficult time understanding that generational trauma paradigm.
Yes.
I think too that people need to realize it's not a way of putting blame on parents, especially right. On the maternal line. You're not putting blame right. Because those folks experience things that they also were not in control of. And for lack of a better way to describe it, those enzymes and juices and neurons were firing well before maybe they even had consciousness in the womb. And that's how right. It travels generationally. So it's not a question of blame. It's not a matter of that. How do people, you've mentioned the word vibration, how do people enhance their vibrational energy not knowing what those wounds are? Is it possible, for someone who's listening right now who has experienced some sort of generational trauma but may not realize it, and they're working on their own vibration? And I'll ask you to define for our listeners what that vibration is. But is it possible for them to raise their vibration without ever knowing what the exact nature of the generational trauma was?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the key things is the breath. It's breathing. It's doing conscious breathing, not just a fast breath. It's sitting in, like a meditative state and doing conscious breathing. And what that does is it gets a lot of blood and oxygen flowing to our brains. And the other important thing is to learn how to ground yourself. So I teach people about, going out in nature. When you feel overwhelmed or things get to be too much, is going out in nature and taking walks, breathing the fresh air, getting the sunlight on your face. And, even being a kid again, take your shoes off, walk in the dirt, walk in the grass, and, allow yourself to be in a beautiful place, and take yourself into a beautiful place in your mind so that you can shift those thoughts and you can shift those things that don't belong to you, even if you don't know what doesn't belong to you. We carry so much energy because we are energy bodies.
JoAnn, some of the things I hear you talking about, I think, we had referenced being in the South before and right. The nature of that. Some people right. listening may say, you know what, I'm a Christian, I can't meditate. They see the two as two completely not only separate, but perpendicular practices. Not so, correct?
No, it's not correct. When your mind is stirred up with, I call it the monkey mind or the judge, when you're in that space, you've not only blocked your mind, but you've blocked your heart, and you're not allowing yourself to receive. There's a give and a take. There's a give and a receive. And I know for myself, who grew up in the South, us Southern women were taught to give, and do, and help, and to forget the self. And that's where the trouble lies, is us not learning that you have to learn not only to give, but you have to learn to receive. It's important to learn that. And you have to be a receiver, because if you just only give, then you're eventually going to be on the floor, emotionally on the floor, and you're going to have nothing left to give. And so through meditating and quieting the mind, you are allowing those things that you have questions about, those things that you need answers for them to arise and come into your mind.